The incessant hum of the human mind is rarely silent. It's a constant, low-frequency buzz. For many, this hum escalates into a deafening roar of what-ifs and endless possibilities. This is the state of overthinking, a modern epidemic silently crippling potential. It's the analysis paralysis that keeps brilliant ideas trapped in the drafting phase. It's the fear of imperfection that prevents a first step from ever being taken. We stand at a crossroads, where the ability to process information has exceeded our capacity to act upon it. This internal conflict is the subject of our investigation. We are pulling back the curtain on the silent saboteur that is overthinking. It's a phenomenon often dismissed as mere anxiety or procrastination. However, its roots run deeper, entwined with evolution, culture, and the rise of digital information. This is a deep dive into the brain's feedback loops and their consequences. We will explore the neurological wiring that makes certain minds more prone to this spiral. We will examine the societal pressures that reward meticulous planning but punish swift execution. The book's title, Stop Overthinking and Start Overcoming, is not just a command. It is a promise of liberation from this mental cage. We are seeking a shift in perspective, a fundamental change in the relationship with one's own thoughts. The opening hook is simple yet profound: the greatest barrier to your success is not external. It is the committee of doubts and scenarios running non-stop in your own head. It is the meticulous creation of problems that do not yet exist in reality. The overthinker builds a complex fortress of hypotheticals, then finds themselves trapped inside. Our journey begins by understanding the architecture of this fortress. We must identify the materials, fear, past failures, future anxieties, used in its construction. Only then can we provide the tools to dismantle it, brick by careful brick. This is the moment to confront the invisible opponent. It's time to move from contemplation to action, from stasis to dynamic change. The goal is not to stop thinking entirely, but to think with purpose, not paralysis. Our exploration requires a careful look at the psychological landscape. We must first delineate the difference between constructive analysis and destructive overthinking. Constructive analysis is time-bound, goal-oriented, and leads to a decision. Destructive overthinking is circular, fear-driven, and results in inaction. The central figure in our narrative is the overthinker. This is not a caricature, but a profile compiled from countless shared experiences. They are intelligent, often highly conscientious individuals. Their strength, their detail orientation, becomes their greatest weakness. We introduce two key subjects: Sarah, an aspiring entrepreneur, and Mark, a seasoned but stalled creative director. Sarah has the perfect business plan, reviewed and refined dozens of times. Yet, she cannot launch, forever tweaking the website or the marketing copy. Her fear is not failure itself, but the public declaration of an imperfect effort. Mark knows his industry inside and out, but his latest pitch has been in a perpetual draft state. He is paralyzed by the memory of a minor error years ago, haunting his current work. These are the living examples of the mental loop in action. Their stories anchor the theoretical concepts in relatable, human struggle. We set the stage by examining the modern environment that amplifies this tendency. The digital age provides an illusion of infinite information and total control. Search engines promise the perfect answer, fueling the belief that a risk-free choice exists. This abundance of data is a feast for the overthinking mind. It provides infinite variables to plug into the what-if equation. We also establish the neurobiological context. Overthinking often triggers the brain's stress response, the fight-or-flight mechanism. The threat, however, is not a predator, but an imagined future scenario. The constant low-grade stress damages decision-making and cognitive function. It's a self-inflicted wound, where the brain becomes both the problem and the solution. Our objective is to retrain the default mental setting. We aim to shift the brain from a state of constant threat assessment to one of calculated forward movement. The subjects' lives illustrate the cost, lost opportunities, strained relationships, and diminished self-worth. The stakes are high, the difference between a life lived and a life merely contemplated. The core mystery lies in the counterintuitive nature of overthinking. Why would a highly functional, intelligent brain intentionally sabotage its own progress? The initial problem is the misidentification of a protective instinct. Overthinking is, at its heart, a misdirected attempt to ensure safety. The brain believes that by exhaustively simulating all negative outcomes, it can neutralize them. It's a form of mental superstition. If I worry about it enough, it won't happen. We delve into the concept of cognitive fusion, where a thought is treated as a fact. The overthinker cannot distinguish between the map and the territory. A passing anxious thought, "This will fail," is immediately accepted as a literal prophecy. This inability to detach from internal dialogue is the initial roadblock. We explore the roots of perfectionism, a close cousin of overthinking. Perfectionism is a defense mechanism against judgment or shame. The desire for a flawless output forces an endless cycle of review and revision. The draft is never sent, the project is never launched, because it is not ready. The mystery deepens when we examine the concept of optimal stopping. This is a mathematical problem that applies directly to decision-making. At what point does the cost of acquiring more information outweigh the benefit? The overthinker's algorithm for optimal stopping is perpetually broken. They believe the optimal point is always just one more minute, one more search, one more draft away. This leads to the inverse effect, diminishing returns on mental energy. The quality of the decision does not improve, but the personal exhaustion skyrockets. We introduce the idea of the second decision. The first decision is the action itself, e.g., launch the business. The second decision is the commitment to stop thinking about the first decision. The overthinker only executes the first, getting trapped in the second. The true problem is not the lack of data, but the lack of an internal cutoff switch. The internal governor that signals, "enough is enough," has been deactivated. Our task is to find and flip that switch, restoring the balance between thought and action. The mystery is solved not by gaining more knowledge, but by learning how to strategically deploy ignorance. The first major clue is discovered in the work of behavioral psychologists. It is the crucial realization that overthinking is often a distraction from a deeper, emotional pain. The relentless mental activity serves as a sophisticated form of avoidance. The brain is busy simulating external scenarios to avoid confronting internal feelings. The true fear might not be the failure of the business, but the feeling of inadequacy that failure would trigger. The overthinking loop is a protective shell, a cognitive shield against vulnerability. We discover the worrying is doing fallacy. The overthinker feels productive when they are worrying, confusing mental effort with forward movement. This provides a false sense of control over chaotic reality. It's a crucial discovery because it shifts the focus from the content of the thoughts to the function of the thoughts. The thoughts about the project are not the real problem, their role in the emotional economy is. We introduce the concept of metacognitive beliefs. These are the beliefs about the act of thinking itself. Examples include, I must worry to be prepared, or my thoughts are uncontrollable. These meta-beliefs are the engine that drives the overthinking habit. If a person believes their worry is essential for safety, they will never stop. The first crucial step to overcoming this is to challenge these underlying rules. We guide the subjects, Sarah and Mark, to an exercise in functional analysis. They are asked to track not just what they thought, but what the thought allowed them to avoid doing. Sarah realized her endless website revisions avoided the terrifying reality of a public launch. Mark's constant editing was a distraction from confronting his fear of criticism from his peers. This discovery is the point where the overthinker moves from victim to agent. They realize the mental activity is a choice, driven by a hidden motive. The clue is the relief that comes when a decision is finally forced upon them. When an external deadline forces Sarah to click launch, a wave of unexpected calm follows the chaos. This proves the paralysis was the problem, not the preparation. The true freedom begins with the self-awareness of the avoidance mechanism. To truly overcome overthinking, we must understand its origins in personal history and cultural context. The deep dive begins with evolutionary psychology. Our ancestors who meticulously scanned the environment for threats survived and passed on their genes. This ancient, threat detection system is highly sensitive, often overfiring in the modern, safe world. Overthinking is simply an archaic survival mechanism operating in a context of social and professional threat. We then transition to developmental psychology, examining childhood environments. Did the person grow up in a high-stakes environment where mistakes were heavily punished? Was the person constantly praised for their intellect or caution, but rarely for courage or action? A child who learns that perfect performance is the only safe harbor will become a perfectionistic adult. This context embeds the always be ready and never be wrong programming. The educational system, for all its benefits, also contributes. It is heavily weighted toward analytical, reflective, and testing-oriented skills. It often fails to teach the crucial skill of good enough execution or rapid prototyping. Students are trained to deliver the final, polished product, not the messy, iterative process. The cultural context is equally critical. The rise of hustle culture and hyperproductivity contributes to the anxiety. There is a constant pressure to optimize every moment, fueling the urge to overanalyze every choice. The fear of missing out, FOMO, is a potent trigger for the overthinker. They fear missing the single piece of information that would guarantee success. This section explores the concept of the narrative self. The overthinker often tells themselves a story: I am the person who analyzes everything. This identity becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, justifying the excessive thought patterns. The key contextual shift is understanding that overthinking is not a personality trait, but a learned behavior. It is a strategy that worked at one point in life, but has now become maladaptive. The liberation comes from realizing that you are not your thoughts, nor are you your old coping mechanisms. The goal is to update the old operating system to better handle the realities of the present day. This section explores the differing viewpoints on treating overthinking, demonstrating the complexity of the issue. The first theory, often advocated in pop psychology, is the just do it approach. It argues for immediate, unreflective action to break the paralysis. While effective for short-term bursts, it often ignores the underlying anxiety. The stakes escalate when this method fails, leading to a feeling of moral failure. The overthinker berates themselves for their lack of willpower, intensifying the cycle. The conflicting theory is the purely introspective, psychoanalytic approach. This argues for an exhaustive search of the unconscious roots of the fear. The danger here is a new form of cognitive paralysis, endless self-analysis. The overthinker trades worrying about external failure for worrying about internal pathology. The action is postponed indefinitely in favor of deeper and deeper self-discovery. We introduce the concept of action-oriented mindfulness. This is the synthesis of the two conflicting theories, providing a balanced path. It suggests acknowledging the anxious thought, introspection, without engaging with it, action. The thought is seen as a signal, like a car horn, not a command. The stakes are raised by introducing the concept of opportunity cost. The longer Sarah waits to launch, the more market share she loses to swifter, if less polished, competitors. The more Mark edits, the more he misses the window for the pitch that aligns with current trends. The stakes are no longer just emotional, but tangible and professional. This section utilizes the regret minimization framework. Often, we regret an action more than imperfect action. The overthinker fears the regret of a bad outcome, but fails to account for the certainty of regret from a missed opportunity. The true, escalating risk is the slow, quiet decay of potential. The final conflict addressed is the battle between efficiency and effectiveness. Overthinking strives for 100% efficiency in preparation, but achieves 0% effectiveness in outcome. The solution is embracing the 80-20 rule, 80% effort for 100% execution. The stakes are clear, the choice between a flawless plan never enacted and a dynamic life in motion. Every journey of overcoming has a point of no return, a moment where the old way becomes untenable. For the overthinker, this point is reached when the pain of inaction finally surpasses the fear of failure. It's the existential realization that they are running out of time, or that a major, non-recoverable loss has occurred. For Sarah, the point of no return arrives when a nearly identical competitor successfully launches their product. They used a good enough strategy, capturing the early market she had meticulously researched. The sting of watching someone else succeed with her idea is a catalyst. It moves her fear from what if I fail to what if I never try. For Mark, the break comes when he is passed over for a major promotion. His manager notes his exceptional analytical skills but cites his chronic inability to finalize and present work. The critique is not about the quality of his thought, but the absence of his action. The system has effectively told him, your thinking is worthless without execution. This section explores the physiological and psychological shift at this critical juncture. The brain, driven by the intense pain of regret, begins to reprioritize. The fear of potential failure is a hypothetical threat. The fear of actual, tangible loss of opportunity is a direct, present threat. The survival instinct shifts from cautious analysis to urgent movement. The point of no return is often marked by a single, small, but decisive act. It is Sarah deciding to send the email with the ugly first draft of the landing page. It is Mark deleting a paragraph of unnecessary analysis instead of adding another. This is the moment of cognitive dissonance becoming productive. The overthinker acts, and the world does not end, thus challenging their core belief. This single act creates a mini-victory that chips away at the fortress of overanalysis. The narrative emphasizes that the point of no return is rarely a grand gesture. It is a quiet internal revolution, a decision to tolerate imperfection for the sake of progress. It is the commitment to live in the real world of messy outcomes, not the perfect, sterile world of the mind. The halfway point of our journey reveals a crucial and counterintuitive truth. The overthinker is not just trying to avoid failure, they are also unconsciously trying to avoid success. This is the midpoint twist, a profound revelation that recontextualizes the struggle. Success requires change, new responsibilities, and a higher level of visibility. It invites greater scrutiny and, therefore, a higher stakes opportunity for future failure. The overthinker's mind calculates that staying small, safe, and perpetually in progress is the easiest way to manage anxiety. If Sarah launches, she has to manage employees, handle criticism, and scale the business. If Mark's pitch is a massive hit, he must now maintain that level of performance for every subsequent project. The perfectionist's fear of success is the fear of being unable to maintain an impossible standard. The twist is that the paralysis is a self-imposed ceiling, not a lack of capability. We introduce the imposter syndrome paradox. The overthinker often suffers from imposter syndrome, believing they are not good enough. Yet, their overthinking ensures they never truly test their limits, keeping the belief intact. The perfectionistic effort is a shield against the final judgment that comes with a finished product. This section details the moment Sarah and Mark realize this hidden motivation. Sarah is paralyzed on the verge of hiring her first employee. She realizes the deeper fear is not managing the payroll, but the loss of solo control. Mark stalls his final presentation, not over the content, but over the thought of becoming the lead visionary. The revelation is that true overcoming is not about simply acting, but about embracing the future identity of the successful person. This future self is more visible, more criticized, and more responsible. The key insight: overthinking is a boundary-setting mechanism designed to keep life manageable, not necessarily perfect. The twist forces them to redefine success not as a destination of flawlessness, but as a commitment to continuous, visible evolution. New evidence from cognitive science reinforces the damage caused by the overthinking cycle. We examine the impact on working memory and executive function. The constant recycling of non-essential information clogs the brain's main processor. This leaves insufficient cognitive resources for actual problem-solving and creative thought. The psychological impact is the phenomenon known as decision fatigue. The mind exhausts its limited energy on small, insignificant choices. When a truly major decision arrives, the person has no capacity left to handle it effectively. The cumulative mental load leads to a decreased tolerance for ambiguity. The overthinker becomes rigid and brittle, unable to pivot when faced with unexpected change. New clinical evidence shows the correlation between overthinking and chronic physical ailments. The continuous production of cortisol and other stress hormones taxes the immune system. The mind's inability to switch off manifests in physical tension, insomnia, and burnout. The overthinking is not just a mental burden, but a whole-body process of depletion. We introduce the concept of psychological flexibility. This is the ability to be present, open up, and do what matters, even when experiencing difficult thoughts and feelings. The overthinker lacks this flexibility, trying to control and eliminate all internal discomfort. The goal shifts from thought suppression to thought acceptance. The new evidence highlights that the most successful individuals are not those who think the most. They are the ones who think the best, meaning they employ strategic, time-boxed thought. The new evidence provides a practical tool, the 2-minute rule for thought. If a thought requires less than 2 minutes of action, do it immediately. If a complex thought enters the loop, give it a maximum of 2 minutes of analysis, then schedule a separate, formal thinking block. This structured approach prevents the chaotic, resource-draining mental chatter. The profound psychological impact of the intervention is the return of mental clarity. The subjects report a feeling of having cleaned out a cluttered room. The new evidence confirms that space in the mind is a finite resource, and overthinking is its greatest squanderer. The truth is the simple, actionable step that is being resisted. The system of overthinking fights back against liberation through various suppression tactics. One common tactic is the false problem generation. The overthinker fabricates a new, minor issue to distract from the main, terrifying step. Sarah finds a new, obscure regulatory hurdle she must research before launch, even though it's irrelevant. Mark decides the entire color palette of the presentation is wrong and must be redesigned, stalling the delivery. These are sophisticated, self-imposed suppressions of forward momentum. Another suppression is the comparative trap. The overthinker actively seeks out examples of hyper-successful, flawless individuals. They use these impossible standards as evidence that their current level of readiness is still insufficient. The internal dialogue attempts to suppress the truth: your work is ready now, it just won't be perfect. The truth is also suppressed by the expert-seeking loop. The overthinker seeks excessive external validation, constantly consulting experts. They seek a single, definitive authority to absolve them of personal responsibility for the decision. This is a subtle attempt to suppress the fact that all action in life involves inherent risk. The ultimate act of suppression is the mental loop itself. The constant, circular rumination drowns out the quiet, internal voice of intuition. Intuition is fast, messy, and non-analytical, everything the overthinker fears. The loop attempts to suppress the truth that some decisions are simply better made with the gut, not the calculator. This section emphasizes the necessity of recognizing the pattern of suppression. When a new, sudden, but minor obstacle appears right before the final step, it must be flagged. It is the internal system's final, desperate attempt to maintain the safety of the status quo. The counteraction is to name the suppression tactic and proceed with the original plan. By consciously labeling the avoidance strategy, its power to suppress the truth is neutralized. The pursuit is the deliberate, forceful march toward the necessary action. The confrontation is the face-to-face meeting with the fear itself. This section details the practical strategies for forcing action when the mind resists. The most effective tool is the 5-second rule. If you have an impulse to act on a goal, you must move physically within 5 seconds. This short window bypasses the prefrontal cortex, the home of overanalysis, and engages the motor cortex. It is a technique for hijacking the system, prioritizing movement over thought. The pursuit for Sarah involves a scheduled, non-negotiable launch day. She announces the date publicly to a small group of friends and potential customers. This introduces a form of positive external pressure, making the delay more socially painful than the launch. The commitment is externalized, removing the internal wiggle room for overanalysis. The confrontation for Mark involves a ugly draft policy. He commits to generating a complete, unpolished, time-boxed first draft in a single sitting. The goal is to force a complete set of ideas into the physical world, making them tangible and mutable. He confronts the fear of the blank page by intentionally making the first result bad. The confrontation is highly specific, identifying the moment the thought turns from constructive to circular. A timer is used as the external referee. When the timer rings, the thought process stops, regardless of how close the solution seems. The action taken is not the perfect solution, but the next logical step. The confrontation requires an embrace of willing imperfection. This is the radical acceptance that the first iteration will not be the best, and that is a prerequisite for the final, best version. The pursuit is relentless because the alternative is a return to stasis. The focus is not on the outcome of the action, but the act of taking action. This section concludes with the energy released from the confrontation. The mental energy previously trapped in the loop is now successfully converted into forward motion. The final pieces of the puzzle involve integrating the knowledge into a sustainable system. The first piece is the understanding of identity shift. Overcoming overthinking is not just a change in behavior, but a change in who you believe you are. The new identity is the executor, the starter, or the experimenter, replacing the analyzer. This new self-concept automatically generates different choices and behaviors. The second piece is the implementation of a done is better than perfect metric. The system requires a clear definition of done before the task begins. For Sarah, done for the website is a functional checkout and 5 pages of basic copy. Anything beyond that initial definition is relegated to iteration 2. This prevents the goalposts from moving indefinitely. The third piece is the practice of decisional hygiene. This involves minimizing low-stakes decisions to save cognitive energy for high-stakes ones. Mark adopts a uniform style of work clothes and simplifies his morning routine. This automates the irrelevant, freeing up bandwidth for the creative work. The final piece is the recognition of the emotional afterglow of action. The subjects realize that the feeling of relief and pride after a decisive action is the true reward. This positive emotional feedback loop counteracts the initial anxiety. The brain learns that action is not a threat, but a source of well-being. The final system is a cycle: intentional thought - time-boxed analysis - decisive action - positive feedback. This is the system that replaces the old cycle of impulse - endless rumination - paralysis - negative feedback. The small, consistent wins create a powerful momentum that makes the entire process effortless over time. The fear of overthinking does not disappear entirely, but its power is severely diminished. It becomes a small, recognizable voice that is easily managed, not a commanding roar. The primary conclusion is that the cure for overthinking is not better thinking, but better boundary setting for thought. The ultimate truth revealed is the inherent impossibility of a risk-free life. Overthinking is a futile attempt to control the randomness and unpredictability of the world. True overcoming is the surrender to this reality. The overthinker must accept that the most complete information is only available after the action has been taken. Action itself is the final, essential form of research. We return to Sarah, who has launched her business and is facing real, minor problems. A customer complaint about a slow delivery, a technical glitch on a page. Crucially, she is no longer paralyzed by these issues. She is in the active mode of problem solving, which is far less stressful than the hypothetical worry. The problems in the real world are finite and actionable, the problems in the mind are infinite. We see Mark, who delivered his presentation imperfectly but successfully. The response was positive, but he received one piece of constructive, but harsh, criticism. He is able to accept the criticism as valuable data, not as a reflection of his self-worth. The truth is that imperfection is the pathway to iteration and improvement. The primary conclusion is encapsulated in a simple equation: action, perfect analysis. The pursuit of perfection is a greater obstacle to success than any mistake. The final victory is the creation of a mental default setting for movement. When an uncertainty arises, the system now defaults to the smallest, safest step forward, rather than a full mental simulation. The truth is a liberation: you already have enough information to start. The rest of the information you need will be revealed on the way. The aftermath of overcoming is not a life without thought, but a life with deliberate thought. The individuals who break the cycle become more effective, not less reflective. They learn to harness their natural analytical intelligence for strategic planning, not for fear-based rumination. Sarah's business thrives because she has learned to delegate and trust her initial, high-level decisions. She uses her analytical skills to review metrics and pivot, a form of analysis that serves action. Mark's career accelerates, as his meticulous attention to detail is now applied to execution, not just preparation. His new legacy is one of a leader who acts decisively and learns rapidly from feedback. The legacy of the overthinker who overcomes is the gift of intentionality. They can now choose what to think about, rather than being chosen by their anxious thoughts. The lessons tie directly into modern research on flow states. By committing to action, the brain enters a state of flow, where the activity and the awareness merge. Overthinking is the antithesis of flow: it is the constant, self-critical observer breaking concentration. The key modern application is in the digital world. The strategies learned are critical for navigating the information overload of the Internet. They provide a filter, allowing the individual to quickly dismiss the vast majority of non-essential data. The modern tie-in emphasizes the role of technology as both a trigger and a potential tool. It is a trigger when it provides endless research loops. It is a tool when used for externalizing thoughts, such as simple to-do lists and time-boxing apps. The aftermath is characterized by increased resilience. The former overthinker has learned that a mistake is not a disaster, but a data point. This fundamental shift creates a psychological buffer against future setbacks. The new state is one of dynamic equilibrium, not rigid control. The journey from chronic overthinking to overcoming is a passage from fear to freedom. We have revealed that overthinking is a protective, but ultimately destructive, coping mechanism. It is driven by a profound misunderstanding of the relationship between thought and action. The central task was not to find a magic bullet, but to build a robust system of cognitive boundaries. The key steps include functional analysis, identifying the avoidance pattern. The establishment of the point of no return, embracing the pain of inaction. The acceptance of the midpoint twist, recognizing the unconscious fear of success. The application of the 5-second rule, bridging the gap between impulse and execution. And the identity shift, moving from the analyzer to the executor. The summary is a testament to the power of self-awareness and practical psychological tools. Overcoming is the commitment to live in the arena of life, not the stands of the mind. It is the continuous act of choosing forward over perfect. However, a lingering mystery remains, the persistent allure of the what if. Even for the most seasoned executor, the comfortable, predictable darkness of the thought loop beckons. Why is the human mind so drawn to the safety of analysis, even when it knows the cost? The answer lies in the deep, ancient wiring of the brain, always scanning for threats. The mystery ensures the journey is lifelong. It is not a destination, but a practice. The ultimate overcoming is the continuous, daily choice to acknowledge the siren call of worry, and still take the step. The final conclusion is an open invitation to the reader. The overthinking will not stop on its own, it requires an active, conscious intervention. The reward is not just professional success, but the recovery of mental peace. The greatest triumph is the quiet, internal realization that you are no longer a prisoner of your own thoughts. The script ends with a final, empowering command, echoing the book's title and its ultimate theme. Stop analyzing the map, and start walking the territory.